It's August 21st here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with the tropical depression Jongdari making land here in South Korea. The storm hit southern parts of the country, leaving over a dozen cars flooded and some flights delayed. The heat that came along with the storm also caused all-time high power demand. Former U.S. President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama are set to speak on the second night of the U.S. Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Former President Donald Trump followed his campaign trail in Michigan. A North Korean soldier defected to South Korea on foot early on Tuesday through an area where North Korean soldiers were recently seen laying mines. Experts said the defection shows there's a loophole in the North's mine-laying operations. Typhoon Jongdari, which approached the Korean peninsula on Tuesday, weakened into a tropical depression, but still brought heavy rain and strong winds, causing some damage in the southern regions of the country. Our Shinayang starts us off.
Typhoon Jongdari, which had been moving north along the west and south coasts, weakened into a tropical depression as of 9 p.m. on Tuesday, according to the Korean Meteorological Administration. It has weakened earlier than expected, and even at its peak, the maximum wind speed barely met the criteria for a typhoon, which is at least 17 meters per second. Although there was no major damage or injuries reported, various minor incidents were reported across the nation. The Ministry of the Interior and Safety reported that as of 6 p.m. Tuesday, 13 vehicles were flooded in Uljugun in Ulsan City. Off the coast of Goseong-gun, Gyeongsang-namdo Province, a fishing boat sank, but the 4 crew members were rescued. On Jeju Island, flight operations were disrupted, with 1 flight cancelled and 145 delayed out of 495 due to bad weather. As Jongdari moved north, it brought hot and humid air, causing a spike in electric power demand across the country. According to the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, as of 5 p.m. Tuesday, the estimated electricity demand reached an all-time high of 97.1 gigawatts. Rain clouds also reduced solar power efficiency in the Honam region in the southern part of Korea, which accounts for 40% of the nation's total solar power capacity. This led to increased market demand. The surge coincides with Seoul experiencing its longest ever streak of tropical nights when nighttime temperatures don't fall below 25 degrees Celsius, which began on July 21st. While rain is forecasted to temporarily lower temperatures on Wednesday and Thursday, they're expected to rise again on Friday. Shinayang, Arirang News.
Day 2 of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago kicked off on Tuesday, where former U.S. President Barack Obama is taking center stage. Now, along with his wife, Obama is looking to garner support for Vice President Kamala Harris. Lee Seung-ja has more.
In 2008, Barack Obama made history by winning the U.S. presidential election to become the first African-American U.S. president. Fast forward more than 15 years, and the former president and his wife, Michelle Obama, will highlight Day 2 of the Democratic National Convention to garner support for Vice President Kamala Harris, who aims to be the first female U.S. president in history. Having started his career as a lawyer and politician in the state of Illinois, Obama long held support in Chicago, where the DNC is currently taking place. Also supporting Harris on Day 2 of the DNC is former White House press secretary under the Donald Trump administration, Stephanie Grisham. Grisham says while she doesn't agree with Harris on all issues, she's proud to be supporting her. She added that after seeing firsthand who the former president really is, she felt strongly about speaking out. Grisham has held a number of different positions during the Trump administration, but resigned in the aftermath of the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. Several Republicans spoke out against Trump on Day 1 of the convention, with more expected to speak during the 4-day event. Meanwhile, former President Trump was criticized for his Tuesday rally in a Michigan town with historic links to white extremism. Trump visited Howell, Michigan, where just 1 month ago, white supremacists held a rally. However, Trump shot down accusations that he's rallying white supremacist support, reminding reporters that President Joe Biden had visited the town in 2021. Trump's campaign spokesperson also rejected criticism of the visit, vowing Trump would speak against hate of any form. 이승재, Arirang News.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's latest Israel trip turned out to be a half deal. Israel okaying a plan to break the ceasefire impasse, but Hamas criticizing such a plan. Now, what lies ahead for the Middle East now? For more, let's turn to Professor Robert Lawrence this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So what happened is that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu agreeing to the U.S.'s new bridging proposal, which reports say is a first time for Netanyahu. How much progress is this?
Well, it is significant progress in that it gets Israel to the table, right? So this proposal, endorsed by Egypt and Qatar, was meant to bridge the gap between the positions of Israel and Hamas to secure a ceasefire. However, it isn't perfect, and Hamas is arguing that the proposal has a pro-Israel bias. It's saying that it deviated from previously agreed upon terms, and it gave in to too many Israeli demands. So hope of a ceasefire is preventing escalation by other regional actors, but it's really going to depend on if Qatar, Egypt, the U.S., and other international actors will be able to convince Hamas to buy in, despite this not being exactly what they want. So there's progress, yes, but there's a lot of work to do over the next few days in Cairo.
To add more, Netanyahu is reportedly being two-faced in that although he's agreed to the proposal, he knows Hamas apparently won't accept the idea. Now, is Netanyahu being political here? What's his deal?
Well, Netanyahu's in a pretty difficult political position right now, from all sides, to be honest. The U.S. has increased its pressure on Israel to make a deal because the U.S. doesn't want to see an escalation into a greater regional conflict, and it believes the ceasefire with Hamas will be the crucial card that can prevent that from happening. Additionally, there are U.S. electoral politics that are playing a crucial role here. Kamala Harris has made this a major talking point along the campaign trail. So domestically in Israel, he's facing a great deal of pressure from domestic rivals concerning his judicial reforms, the ongoing corruption trial, the security failure that allowed October 7th to happen. And I would argue, more importantly, the perception that he's refusing to make the hostages the top priority. This has led a lot of people in Israel to accuse him of prolonging the war to stay in power, to avoid these inquiries and trials. So even on top of that, on top of his domestic foes, inside of his ruling coalition, the far-right members are also threatening to dissolve government if he's too lenient in the negotiations with Hamas. So Netanyahu is pretty busy trying to keep his head above water and keep the government intact.
Well, Hamas is clearly not too fond of this ceasefire deal, saying they don't need new Gaza ceasefire negotiations. Instead, they're requesting that they need to agree on an implementation mechanism. Now, what do they mean by this implementation mechanism?
Well, Hamas doesn't believe that any variation from the previously agreed upon arrangement is necessary. They want to implement what was already agreed upon. So in May 31st, President Joe Biden laid this some principles out in a White House speech, and Israel agreed to these principles. This was the basis for a United Nations Security Council resolution, which then turned into a proposal made by mediators, and Hamas agreed to that on July 2nd. So Hamas doesn't want to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. They want to implement what they've already negotiated. However, since then, Israel has changed its demands on a few crucial subjects that are unacceptable to Hamas, and Israel isn't willing to budge on. So this is where we run into a problem with the current situation. Hamas doesn't want to implement, or Hamas doesn't want to renegotiate. They want to implement the previous arrangement. Therefore, they don't really see much efficacy or any need for a bridging proposal.
Well, that leads to my next question. What deals will eventually satisfy Hamas then? What do you think, Professor Lawrence?
Well, Hamas wants a prisoner exchange, reconstruction arrangements, a permanent ceasefire, and all Israeli troops out of Gaza. Now, just to be more specific on the last two, Hamas does not want a temporary ceasefire that could end as soon as Israel gets back its hostages. Moreover, Hamas doesn't accept any Israeli troops hanging behind to maintain control of the Philadelphia and Netzarim corridors. So these two corridors are very important. The Philadelphia corridor is a 14-kilometer corridor on the Gazan side of the Egyptian border, under which Israel has found dozens of tunnels. Now, Israel is maintaining that it wants to keep control of this so that munitions can't be smuggled underneath the border, and Hamas won't be able to rearm itself, right? The Netzarim corridor is a little bit different. It divides the Gaza Strip between north and south. And Hamas wants the people who are misplaced because of the fighting, because of the war, to be able to freely go back north to their homes. Israel doesn't see it this way. Israel wants to have checkpoints up to be able to make sure that there are no armed Hamas fighters going north, thus threatening Israel further. So those are the four main demands that Hamas has. But you run into some serious roadblocks with the last two.
Well, regardless of all these complex situations, Israel is still sending its negotiating team to Egypt this week for a fresh round of Gaza ceasefire and, like you said, hostage release talks. How meaningful would this trip be if Hamas is not going to be there?
Well, it's tough to say. I would say Hamas is likely going to have a presence at the negotiations. It may not be directly, sitting at the table directly across from its Israeli counterparts, but just like in Doha, they're going to have people nearby the negotiations that are able to take part on some level. With Qatar and Egypt's support for this proposal and all the other international support, I think the opportunity cost and the increased threat of a wider regional conflict implicit in a failure in these negotiations, it makes it very risky to let all of this effort go to waste, because there's no real guarantee that this will be repeated. So we'll have to see how the next few days go, but I think it could be extremely dangerous if these efforts dissolve into nothing. There's still, plenty of possibility to take meaningful steps in negotiations over the next few days if all parties engage.
All righty, Professor Lawrence, thank you so much for your insight and your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you. You have a wonderful day.
You too. A North Korean soldier crossed the inter-Korean border on early Tuesday, expressing his will to defect to the south. Now, an expert says there may be a loophole in terms of where the crossing took place. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung reports.
A North Korean soldier defected to South Korea on foot early on Tuesday. According to a South Korean military source, the soldier, who is reportedly a staff sergeant, crossed the military demarcation line in the northeastern county of Goseong-gun, Gangwon-do province. Wearing a military uniform, they are believed to have walked south using the road along the east coast. South Korea's military tracked and monitored the individual and conducted an operation to guide them into the south. The individual has been handed over to relevant authorities. The area where the crossover happened, Goseong, is close to where South Korea has been carrying out loudspeaker propaganda broadcasts in retaliation to North Korea's continued trash balloon deliveries. It's also near where North Korean soldiers were recently seen laying mines as part of the regime's efforts to prevent North Koreans from crossing the border.
You could say that the defection shows there's a loophole in North Korea's mine laying.
South Korea's unification ministry said that the number of defections by North Korean soldiers could be an indirect indicator of the conditions faced by the regime soldiers near the border. Tuesday's border crossing comes less than 2 weeks after a North Korean resident defected to South Korea by crossing the maritime border. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Washington reaffirmed its stance that the ongoing Ulji Freedom Shield exercise are defensive in nature, in response to claims from North Korea that the drills are a rehearsal for an invasion. According to Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder on Tuesday, Pyongyang's criticism of the joint exercises is patently false, adding that there are opportunities for the allied forces to work together on interoperability and learn how to operate in dissimilar environments. South Korea and the U.S. kicked off the annual exercise on Monday, which will go on for 11 days. The drills include a computer simulation-based command post exercise, concurrent field training, and civil defense drills. President Yoon Suk-yeol may host Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida early next month, according to Japanese outlet Kyodo News on Tuesday, citing Japanese diplomatic sources. This follows Kishida's surprise resignation last Wednesday, with Japan set to hold an internal election to choose its new prime minister at the end of September. In response to the report, the president's office did confirm Tokyo had shown interest in a visit even before Kishida announced he would be stepping down, that the two sides have been working on details, but nothing has been decided yet. It added that President Yoon is open to meeting Prime Minister Kishida at any time as part of diplomacy between South Korea and Japan for what will be the 10th meeting since Yoon's inauguration. The South Korean government and the ruling party announced their key direction for next year's budget proposal, which will include sharply increased support for small businesses and expanded benefits for families with more than one child. Our Song Yujin has the details.
The government and ruling party will focus the 2025 budget on supporting vulnerable groups, boosting economic vitality, and preparing for the future.
As household finances are tight and domestic economic challenges are expected to persist, various physical and financial policy measures need to follow to address these issues.
During a meeting at the National Assembly on Tuesday, senior government officials and the People Power Party agreed to issue a record 5.5 trillion Korean won, or around $4 billion in gift certificates, offering discounts for goods at traditional markets to support small business owners.
We decided to reduce the number of restricted business types eligible for the coupons from the current 40 to 28.
To address the country's low birth rate and aging population, benefits for households with 2 or more children will be expanded. This includes increasing the subsidy for buying electric vehicles to up to 6 million won, or $4,500, which is double the current amount. Also, for families with 3 or more children, the discount rate on public transportation passes will be increased up to 50%. In response to growing safety concerns about electric vehicle batteries following recent EV fires, the two sides also agreed to deploy 90,000 EV chargers with fire prevention features and allocate extra funds for purchasing unmanned water cannons and other firefighting equipment. The PPP emphasized that the budget for next year aims to maintain sound financial management while also improving welfare for the socially vulnerable. The government plans to submit the final bill to the National Assembly on September 2nd. Song Yujin, Arirang News.
Good morning. I'm Kim Si-young, and this is The World Now. We begin today in India, where demonstrations erupted on Tuesday in the country's western state of Maharashtra after 2 4-year-old girls were allegedly sexually assaulted by a cleaner at a school near Mumbai. According to the local media, protesters marching for justice halted trains by occupying a railway station and its tracks. Indian security forces attempted to disperse the protesters using tear gas and batons, and the protesters responded by pelting stones at the authorities. Train services resumed after 10 hours. Indian police said that the alleged perpetrator at the school in the town of Badlapur in the Tain district has been arrested, while the state chief minister Eknath Shinde added that the case would be fast-tracked. Now to Italy, where the search for 6 missing people, including British tech tycoon Mike Lynch and his daughter, continued into the dark of the night on Tuesday following an intense storm suspected to have sunk the luxury yacht on Monday. The British-flagged Beijing, a 56-meter-long super yacht, was carrying 22 people and anchored just off the port of Porticello when it was hit by what is believed to be a ferocious pre-dawn tornado over the water, also known as a watersprout, and sank. Specialist divers continue to search for 6 people, while one body recovered near the yacht on Monday is believed to be that of the chef of the Beijing, Canadian Antiguan Ricardo Thomas. Witnesses say that the vessel, anchored only 700 meters from Porticello, just east of Palermo, disappeared within minutes, despite naval experts saying a boat as big as the Beijing would have been designed to stay afloat for hours even after taking on water. Salvatore Cucina, head of the Civil Protection in Sicily, leading the rescue mission, said that there is little chance of finding more survivors. In Kenya, a man arrested over a month ago, suspected of killing some 42 women, including his wife, escaped from police custody on Tuesday in the country's capital, Nairobi. The alleged serial killer, 33-year-old Collins Jumaisi Kalusha, was arrested when the police discovered at least 6 bodies wrapped in plastic bags in an abandoned quarry, now used as a trash dump, which was located near his home. A police spokesperson said on Tuesday that Jumaisi broke out of the Jigiri police station along with 12 Eritrean nationals. Kenya Police Acting Inspector General Gilbert Masengeli added that the police have launched a manhunt to rearrest the escapees and that the force's preliminary investigation indicates that the escape was aided by insiders. Bolivian firefighters on Monday continued efforts to bring forest fires in the country's Santa Cruz region under control, with the month-long blaze already causing significant damage to residents, wildlife and the landscape. According to an official report, the forest fires have devastated over 2 million hectares of land, with over 500 firefighters deployed in the Santa Cruz, Beni and Pando regions. While the forest fires forced locals to flee and scorched the wildfire, a biodiversity team from Santa Cruz Natural Resources Directorate rescued animals, including anteaters and lizards, which will be given treatment before being released back to their original habitat.
Good morning. Heavy rain has been lashing down in central regions, causing headaches for morning commuters. It is due to Typhoon Jongdari, which weakened to a tropical depression last night. And through the afternoon, the capital and Gangwon-do province could receive 30 to 50 millimeters an hour of downpours, along with strong winds. Central parts of Korea need to brace for a lot of rain into tomorrow. A heavy rain watch is in place for most of the central areas in Chungcheong-do provinces. A wind advisory is in place along the coastal areas, and a high seas advisory has been issued for waters of Jeju and parts of the South and West Sea. So please stay away from the water today. Temperature-wise, Seoul woke up to a new record of 31 consecutive tropical nights this morning. Highs will be about 7 degrees lower this afternoon, topping out at 30 degrees here in the capital, Daegu, Gyeongju at 34 degrees. Today's rain will not bring the much-needed autumn vibe to the country, so please brace for heat through the end of the month. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have at this hour. We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang.